Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Leifer. I'm the director of the Usdan Institute for Animal Health Education at the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center. On behalf of my colleague, Kimberly Young, thank you for joining us for tonight's book club event. We are thrilled to have Dr. Renée Alsarraf with us to discuss her memoir, Sit, Stay, Heal: What Dogs Can Teach Us About Living Well. Dr. Renée Alsarraf is a board-certified veterinary oncologist who completed an internship and a medical oncology residency right here at the Animal Medical Center. She went on to create 4 veterinary oncology practices and lead 3 radiation facilities. In 2018, after working for several decades as a veterinary oncologist, Dr. Alsarraf herself was diagnosed with cancer and found herself confronting many of the same issues as her patients and their families. Her journey inspired her to write Sit, Stay, Heal, reflecting on the lessons she's learned in her practice and from her own experience as a patient. Dr. Alsarraf, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And most importantly, I'm happy to let everyone know that, thank goodness, you are in remission and feeling well, right?
Yes, thank goodness. And thank you for having me, Michelle.
It's very, very special to have you here, and both as the author of this extraordinary book and as an AMC alum. And we just so happen to have a photo of you from your residency in the class of 1994. And let's see, that's you in the pink, right?
Yep, that's
looking
me.
Wonderful. Thank you for letting us share that with everyone. But we, again, are very proud to have you and happy to have you here. And actually with that, can we start out and just talk a little bit about your time at AMC? As well as your decision to pursue a specialty in veterinary oncology.
Okay, so it actually started when I was in veterinary school at Michigan State University, and we were getting ready. This was summer between sophomore and junior year, and everyone was talking about things they could do for the summer. And back then, that was before the internet, so we found out about our information on a bulletin board with a little tack. And tacked up there was an informational flyer from the Animal Medical Center offering externships in different topics. And I saw it and I thought, oh my goodness, I would love to do that. I applied for the oncology externship. And of course, at the time, it probably wasn't very popular, so I didn't have much competition. I got it. And without any hesitation or worry, coming from the Midwest, I moved for 6 weeks in the summer to New York City, and it changed the trajectory of my life. I loved every minute of it. It was fantastic. I, at the time, didn't even know that there were internships and residencies, things like that. But I did know that I had wanted to go back there and be, an AMCer. And as a senior, I then applied for an internship and was fortunate enough to be chosen as one of the interns, and obviously stayed on to do my residency. But I cannot say enough good about it. It was the best training anywhere around, seeing not just so many cases, but getting to interact with so many specialists who are at the top of their field, and learning from them was invaluable.
One other thing also about at AMC is that you met your husband here as well, right? So
yes.
which was really, really wonderful. We have a picture just to show your family too, and that's your son, Peter. So thank you for sharing that with us too. But he was an intern, correct, at the time?
He was an intern, and left to do a residency and master's in ophthalmology.
Wonderful. Okay. So let's just go back now to veterinary oncology. It was a very new specialty at that time. So you were there really right at the beginning. It was only established, I think, in 1988. So you were there, right? So
yes.
Obviously, it's changed a lot over the years. What are the biggest changes that you found, over the years?
My goodness. I don't even know how to answer that because it started with very little data or a few studies in the 70s, people trying, COP or even just cyclophosphamide as a single agent drug, and has blossomed not into just learning about the biologic behavior and creating standards of care for different cancers, but now going into more targeted therapies. I think one of the things that attracted me to the specialty is it's ever changing, right? And there's always new things, new clinical trials, new ways to try to improve the length and the quality of a pet's life.
Even after decades of working in this field, you were not prepared for getting your own diagnosis, and it just floored you. I think you said it was a sucker punch, right?
Yes.
As you started your treatment, you took a cue from dogs. It was helpful as your role model. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So they not only were my role model, but they set my recovery bar higher. On some level, dogs just handle certain things better, right? If you think of a dog that has been spayed, the next day she's chasing a squirrel in the backyard or at the park. Whereas if you've ever known a woman that's had a hysterectomy, like I did, she's not supposed to drive for a few weeks and I'm walking hunched over. But one of the other things that they do is they literally live in the moment, right? They are the pinnacle of mindfulness. And I think one of the things that brings us down is our negative thoughts in our head, all the what ifs. So a week before I would get my chemo, I would be fretting. What will I look like? How sick is sick? Will she get the catheter in? And then even after the chemotherapy's done, I think, oh my goodness, it took her twice or 3 times to get the catheter in. What's going to happen next time? Dogs don't have that. And I think that negative energy just serves to bring us down. If we didn't use our energy that way, we could use it to heal or to get better or to fight stronger or harder. When a dog is done with chemotherapy, they hop off the table and they're looking for a little biscuit or a treat. My joke is that, nobody ever gave me a piece of Godiva, but wouldn't it be great, ladies, when you go to the gynecologist, if they give you your own little piece of Godiva and make it a happier occasion instead of something that you dread?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just great. My dog at home was my nursemaid. He was my constant companion, and it didn't matter if I had straggly, stringy chemo hair plastered to my skull. When he looked at me, I knew that he loved me completely, and I was whole in his eyes. And that helped me to have more strength and oomph to fight because he saw me for who I was.
I think that's important too. Just even they're non-judgmental and their self-acceptance and just all of that, which I think is we can take a lesson from them from any type of struggle, really. Right?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. And not being judgmental is, there are so many lessons in each chapter, sort of each, every chapter is about a different dog patient of mine, and either what the family learned from their dog or what I learned, and then woven through is my backstory. But one of the big lessons is that dogs don't judge us, right? They have a whole host of emotions. They can be happy or sad. They can even be fearful or excited, but they never look at us in a judgmental tone. They don't judge our work history, or if I had a misstep or maybe said something that was foolish. They meet us where we're at. They accept us and love us. And I think we're all, as people, a little bit judgy, but we'd all be a little bit better off if we weren't. And I know personally for me, and I know some other people, I have this voice inside my head, and sometimes she can be terribly judgy. In fact, she's probably always judgy about myself. And yet my dog never has that. If I could take a cue from the four-legged around us to not do that, I think we'd all be a lot better off. I would certainly be happier.
I agree. Yes, no, definitely. In addition to that, they're also there to support us, right? So I know Newton you had with you throughout. Talk a little bit about that. And I know obviously that became a hard situation, but he was your steadfast supporter.
He was. And, one of the lessons from him is that dogs are incredible friends. They are steadfast, they are loyal, they love us unconditionally, they provide unbridled companionship. And these are all characteristics that we look for in a friend. And despite his own issues, he unfortunately, the biggest sucker punch of all, while I was going through chemotherapy, I diagnosed him with lymphoma. So he went through chemotherapy alongside me. But despite his own issues, he always showed up for me. And he always showed up for my son, who at the time was a teenager and never missed a game of shooting hoops in the backyard. It was just incredible. We get our dogs because we want companions, whether it be for a walk in the park, or if, they're going to sit with us as we're watching TV at night or reading. We never think that they're going to be our companions during these struggles. I think for me, the resounding main lesson in the book is that our dogs are not just there as support, but they serve as incredible guides for those of us who struggle. And we all go through struggles. And to get to have a front row seat to see the enormous power that the human animal bond plays in all of our lives is very important. And I'm grateful for it.
And I know that he's a beautiful dog. You've had many boxers over the years,
yes.
Right? So tell me, what is your attraction to the breed, do you think? How did you decide?
Oh my goodness.
To get your first. And
I was in junior high. We had lost our Scotty, unfortunately. And I had wanted another dog. And so my mom had the AKC book of dogs, breeds, which at that point was the Bible. And I would sit there and I'd look at all the pictures and I'd circle the ones I loved and I would cross out the ones that I didn't like. And then I would read about them. But what really helped and what was so fortunate is my mom then took me to a couple of dog shows, and I got to actually meet the breeds, see what they were like. And I instantly fell in love with the boxer breed. Don't get me wrong. I think, adopting, mixed breeds or strays is fine and is great. I think everyone and every family is different. In fact, our current boxer had multiple litters. I got her when she was 4.5.
That's right.
So I get that, but for me, it just really clicked. And I think, my boxer now, Dusty, she's my new girlfriend. In fact, she's the first female dog I've ever had. And just to have that female energy has been really nice. That's her looking back at me.
There she is.
I did learn something, and I don't know if you all know this, but that female dogs that have had litters that are in shelters that have sort of the pendulous mammae or teats often get overlooked and won't be adopted because people don't like to see sort of that longer mammary gland or nipple. Which is sad, right? Because they're wonderful dogs. They're great. And, she's a little gray around the muzzle and has a few wrinkles, so I can relate. But it's been good.
Now, I love the story of when you went to adopt her and you were saying, of course, if you're going to go to a breeder, or to go there, it wasn't like you were going to come home empty-handed, right? Your husband, you're like, I'm just going to go just take a look. But so exactly. She was one of the a retired
Yes,
Sam. Yeah.
correct.
So
Yeah. It's just
yes.
like when you go to a candy store, you're not coming
Yeah.
home without the candy.
No, no,
Yes. So when we went to
absolutely.
go look at her, how could we not bring her home?
Wow. All right. I'd love to talk also just about some of your patients that you do feature in the book, which are wonderful. I know you've had many, many over the years. I mean, how did you choose these particular ones that you do feature? That's
So
interesting.
I sat down and just wrote a bunch of very memorable patients down and sort of life lessons that I learned, that the family learned. And quite frankly, I could have written 3 books. I had so
Absolutely.
many. I had
The next
also,
one, yeah, you have many
yes,
for the next one,
exactly.
right?
I had also added in, cats and some
Mhm.
pocket pets and stuff. But the resounding theme, I think it was easier to have these life lessons with dogs. And then the ones that I chose, it was because their life lessons sort of mirrored where I was in my journey. And their life lessons, I think, were more obvious than others. There are certainly some that easily could have made it in. I'll tell you all one. It was this gentleman who came in and he brought his little Shih Tzu in. She was very sweet. She was diagnosed with lymphoma. And, I always try to get to know the patient. One of the differences I think sometimes between a human physician and a veterinarian is we get to know that family and we honor that family dynamic in the treatment process, because so much goes into decisions as to whether or not we treat or how we treat or why we treat. But this gentleman was always very closed, couldn't even look at me, would look down at the ground. And I thought, oh my goodness, he's shy. Maybe he'll open up in time. I saw him for a year and a half. I just got short little answers. He never opened up, which was fine. Everyone is different. After about a year and a half, unfortunately, the little Shih Tzu, we lost the battle.
Mhm.
And about a month later, I got a large manila envelope mailed to me, addressed to the veterinary hospital. And it was from him. And it had a handwritten note on a few pages and some photos. And finally, he opened up. He said that this had been his daughter's dog. And I believe at the age of 23, she had passed away. And they had gotten the dog as a positive sort of therapeutic thing in her life. And now the only living, breathing thing they had left of her was the little Shih Tzu.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it turns out, and this is a lesson, turns out that the family could not afford the care at all. He never told me that.
Mm.
After his day job, he then took a job on the midnight shift at the local grocery store, and he was the gentleman that cut the cold cuts for the next day. And, life lesson, most of us veterinarians are these big bleeding hearts. And if we know that you're struggling financially, we will really try to find ways to help you so that we can best help your dog or your cat. So tell us. But I was glad he finally opened up. I just
Wow.
wanted to give him a hug.
Oh, which I know you're a hugger, which I found really wonderful too. And which is something that's not done as much in human medicine, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but even just about that, talking about the different protocols, how it, in veterinary medicine, there's much more, it's not one protocol where you found more in human medicine. Can you talk a little bit just about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think so. In veterinary medicine, we have to take in so many things, and it doesn't matter if it is cancer or diabetes or heart disease or kidney disease. Part of it is the pet parent's ability to come into the clinic,
Mhm.
about that. Part of it is finances. Part of it is their, how risk averse are they, for side effects. What sort of nursing care can they do at home? Can they give fluids at home? Say if it's a pet with some kidney insufficiency, and just learning about that family dynamic, that is so important. And it's important to open up and discuss these things with your veterinarian. Whereas for the most part, or at least when I would see my physician, I'm given one protocol to follow, which we often do blindly, right? And I firmly believe that knowledge is power. So the more I can teach someone about their pet's condition, and then the more that they can help in that decision process, hopefully the fewer regrets they have, or the more power they feel they have. Because at the end of the day, I don't want anyone to have any regrets. And I think if you feel that you're a part of that decision process, or you feel that you understand that decision process, it really helps. And I didn't feel that way in the human world. Granted, all I wanted to do was be cured, right? But they didn't even go over prognosis or percent that get certain side effects. Whereas most veterinarians, especially oncologists, we can rattle off these numbers like a savant, right? What percent go into remission, how long that remission is, whether it's in days or weeks or months, or hopefully years. But they didn't do that.
Do you think maybe they don't want to put things in people's heads, or give them a,
Right. And when I pushed, because I was sort of annoying that way, they said, it doesn't matter what the masses do. It only matters what you do. So it doesn't even matter if you're the 10% who does poorly or the 20% who hits it out of the park. It only matters what you do. And I get that. And I also get that if it's not great news, they want you to go in with the best possible attitude. So they don't want to maybe tell you that. But I think in the veterinary world, it's so important to know all those things so that you can make the best decision for your pet and your family, and you can know what to expect. For me, because I'm so type A, whatever that prognosis was, it wasn't going to get me down. I was determined that I was going to do better than the average person. But
did you, did your physicians, I'm sure you mentioned to them what you did, and how did they take that? Did they see the correlation? Were they like,
They did, they were very open about it. It was good. I think, again, kind of sometimes, maybe they were rolling their eyes in their head because I would ask things like the nadir of leukopenia, which nadir of leukopenia is the time at which your white blood cell count is the lowest. And I remember my medical oncologist looking at me like, really? But for me, if you can tell me what few days or week my white count is going to be the lowest, I'm going to do self-induced house arrest. I'm not going to go to the mall or the grocery store and subject myself to germs. I, again, just saw that as part of my warrior status.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of your patients. We can show a picture too of Daisy in the Elsa dress, which is amazing. Just see a quick picture. So cute. Yes. And you described this really well in the book, but just if you could just speak a little bit about her and just that family.
Okay, so Daisy came in as a new patient. She was an older Cocker Spaniel. She came in with a wonderful but sort of disheveled mom. And what I thought she was pushing a child in a stroller. And then once I actually got closer to them, it ended up being her 9-year-old special needs daughter that was in a special wheelchair held up by straps. They had adopted the daughter from Indonesia, I believe. She couldn't speak. She couldn't eat by mouth. She had a gastric feeding tube or a feeding tube in her stomach. She really couldn't use her hands or her legs. But their dog, Daisy, was her constant companion. The girl loved Disney and princesses, but her favorite princess was Elsa. So hence she would come in, the parents dressed her up in the blue Elsa dress. And truth be told, I don't know that anyone knows this. I've actually never seen the movie, right? But I'm told that Elsa possesses these magical qualities and she can manipulate ice and snow and make people happier and improve their lives. And that's exactly what Daisy did. in addition to all of Kathy, the girl's special needs, she also had epilepsy. And without any training whatsoever, Daisy became a seizure alert dog for the family and could alert the parents before another epileptic episode so that the parents could institute either care or caution or whatever. She became instrumental in their lives. They, despite all the responsibilities that they had at home, they decided to treat, and she lived 3+ years, thank goodness, doing great. And just to get to know that family, I think even though, all of my patients have cancer, and I kind of middle finger in the air, ladies, had cancer, I think that's more in the background, but instead it is getting to know these families and the struggles that they had and the life lessons and the joy that they got from their pets is really more the resounding theme. But for that family, the Johnson family, they wanted to do everything they could for Daisy. One of the other things is it's hard to talk to your child about, right, having to potentially lose your dog or their dog. But then to talk to a 9-year-old special needs girl about that, who relied on that dog for her betterment in life, was even harder. So to get to understand that process, hopefully, is portrayed in that book too.
No, absolutely. You were saying, that when people hear what you do, they're like, what a hard job, right? How do you do that? So, but yet you get so much out of it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
I think,
So it's a hard job. It is emotional roller coaster, talking to people about life and death and trying to be there for them. One of the things I also talk in the book is about trying to minimize their scars. I don't know, I had scars on my abdomen that maybe bandages or ointment, but it's more about our emotional scars and the things that we're left with. And as hard as my job is, there is nothing else that I would rather do to get to know that family, to be able to give them, say, another summer or a few more years, is the best gift of all. And often, no matter how short or long the time is, when that happens, we all cherish those days more than we would, right? We don't take them for granted like we used to. One of the things is, I had to talk to my son about this, and that's another sort of appeal, is sort of just, being a mom, juggling work, marriage, facing our own mortality, and raising a teenager, God help me. And we all want our pets to live so much longer than their natural lifespan, right? Lord knows I do. But they don't. But I do firmly believe that our dogs and other animals, but just for the sake of, I guess, this discussion, our dogs are placed in our lives at just the right moment to teach us lessons, and sometimes lessons that we didn't even realize we needed to learn, or to fill a hole in us that we didn't even realize. And so while it is so sad to have lost a pet, I do feel blessed to have gotten a few or many, depending on people's lives, pets in my life for just that reason.
It's beautiful. Absolutely. I feel the same. I think everyone here probably does. And on that note, let's talk a little bit about Cosmo, the golden retriever, who was a dog that you did keep alive to give many summers more time to the family.
Yeah. So Cosmo came in, he had actually seen a few other veterinarians, and he was an older, actually, oh my goodness, how old? 14, I think, golden retriever who had a long list of other issues. And, age is not a disease, and we, treat as long as there's good quality of life. But he had a tumor that was eating through his bone in his hind leg. It was actually not osteosarcoma, but a different type of cancer called a histiocytic sarcoma. And they had to pull him around in a wagon or sling him because otherwise he couldn't ambulate on his own. They made the decision, they didn't want to amputate, understandably. He had arthritis, and that would have been very difficult for him to get around. But they did opt for stereotactic radiation, so 3 doses of radiation to that part of his leg. And within about 10 days, he was able to rise and walk a little bit on his own. And after the recheck, which was about 2.5 weeks or so, maybe 3 weeks, he was walking around on his own. The family had 2 more years with Cosmo.
Wow.
They always took their annual trek up to Maine and went to Acadia National Park, and they would send me pictures every year of him, God help him, going in the water, which I can imagine how cold it was, or walking ahead of them on a trail and just loving life. They made the most of those 2 years. It was really quite wonderful.
Really wonderful. And then let's talk also about Franny, which is the bloodhound. This is a very, interesting case too. Yeah.
Yes. So Franny was a bloodhound that came to me. She was obviously a working police dog, and she and her partner came in, and she had a mast cell tumor in her stomach, which is very rare. She had it removed. Unfortunately, the average prognosis, even with treatment, is about 3 months. Franny is still alive and doing well today. I had a large book event, and they brought her, and she just stole the show, as she should have. She's great. She had a couple of lessons, I think. For her, in part, is that the sum of her and her police person's efforts are far greater than what the two can accomplish alone. And I think that sort of takes us into this whole thing that dogs are pack animals, right? And they existed in the wild because they're a pack. They rely on each other for food. They help protect each other. They even lay on each other for warmth. And here now the trend is to buy weighted blankets because it feels so good. And yet all you need really is for your dog to lay on you. It feels so wonderful. And they've evolved, genetically speaking, right? At first, back thousands of years, they might eat the little meat off the bones that we discarded, and then they evolved to help us hunt and tend flocks. Now they're used for special needs people or for the police force as bomb sniffing dogs. They make our lives better. And I know for me personally, my dogs certainly make my life better. But I think if we take that lesson out even a little bit further, we as people do so much better as a pack and as having each other's backs and helping each other instead of having sort of that individual, mindset. It's really a really good lesson. One of the other lessons from the bloodhound is, she's wrinkly and full of drool, and she doesn't care, and she's happy. And that girlfriend gained 50 pounds during treatment, having nothing to do with her chemotherapy, but everyone at the precinct felt sorry for her. So they gave her a treat, or after her chemo, she would get a special treat. And she went, granted, she was skinny to begin with, about 70 something when she came in. She now tops the scales at about 121 pounds. She had to retire because she was too slow in the fields to do search and rescue work. It was too hard through marshes and fields and stuff, and she would just lumber along. but she didn't care. She loved it, right? And during therapy, because of the treatment, I had gained weight and went up a few dress sizes, to say the least. And it bothered me to no end. Right? And here we all struggle, no matter what it is, to stay alive and to be well. And here I was living and beating cancer. And yet I lamented my days because of the number on the scale. What a complete waste that
Right.
is, right?
Mm.
We should embrace and celebrate our imperfections. And dogs get these lumps and warts, and they don't care. And we love them just the same. We just have to remember to love ourselves just the same when we have our imperfections.
So important. And then just also back to just the idea of the pack and having support from those around you. Even just back to you talk about when you did get the diagnosis that you were going to have a party and that you were like cancel the party, right? And just
Yes.
then you thought of it, you said, my dog wouldn't have done that, right? And maybe.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Ladies, I'm the poster child for why we all need to go to the doctor every year. I went every year. I would always go in August to the gynecologist. I was 51, TMI, still got my period every month. Nothing had changed, wasn't any more lethargic. Unfortunately, hadn't lost a pound, nothing. And on my exam, she noticed what she had hoped was a polyp. And unfortunately, it turned out that it was cancer. I got the call on July 3rd at 7 p.m. And yet on July 4th, we were set to have 17 adults over and 8 kids for a huge 4th of July party. And my refrigerator was stocked full of hamburgers and hot dogs. And I had made, all sorts of accompanying sides. And all we could think of doing was canceling that party, right? Now, our dogs would have never canceled it. They would have gone on to celebrate the day. And in doing so, they would have had the love of their family and friends around them. And instead, we had a somber 4th, in a sense, if you will, licking my wounds or feeling worried, feeling sorry for myself, wondering about the what ifs. But we would have done better had we had our pack around us.
But your pack, you definitely did rely on them.
Yes.
Though for taking, which was really wonderful, both taking you to treatment and taking your dog, right? So it did take, it takes like a village, but everyone really came together to help you, which was beautiful. And you allowing that help, right? Which was, you said you don't like to ask for help or,
Correct, right? As a veterinarian, I like to mend that little baby bird's wing who just fell out of the nest. I'm not good at accepting help or asking for help, but my goodness, if there isn't a better time than that. And part of it was my girlfriends were like, listen, we're still going to bring you food, even if you say you don't want dinners. So at least let's set up a schedule or tell us your likes and dislikes. And it's so true. And for those of you who have done that for a girlfriend, if, they've lost a family member or whatever, it's so much more than a hot dish or a casserole. Food is nourishment for our bodies and our souls, and it's a form of love. And it helped me and it helped my family as well. So I'm so grateful to my girlfriends who helped.
And then many of those same friends are the ones who encouraged you to start writing this book, right? So
yes.
Tell me about that, the process and what convinced you. And we're so glad that you did.
Thank you. So, at age 50, whatever, I had never done one stitch of social media. But after I was diagnosed, everyone always wanted to know how I was doing, where I was in my protocol. And I found it was just too exhausting to tell the story over and over again. So I decided to email, my closest, friends and family, it morphed into about 75 people. And some of those people were my son's friends' mothers or parents, because our house was always where the boys came. And they needed to know if, Peter's mom was laying on the sofa, not looking very good. The emails that I would receive in return became my lifeline. They were filled with love and supportive words, which I just clung to. But also, so many of them would say, have you ever thought about writing a book? You really should write a book. I blew them all off. One of my son's friends' parents is actually a very famous literary agent in New York City. And she was one of the people that said, you really should think about writing a book. I still blew them all off. I finished treatment. I might bump into them at the local grocery store, and they would say the same thing. And while I've always wanted to write a book, just as a veterinarian, it is just too all-encompassing, right? It's more than a job. For me, it's more than even just a profession. It's my identity. But I certainly didn't have time to do anything else. And then my husband and I took a long weekend, just a little vacation, to a resort in Rhode Island. And one morning, at the foot of, or at the base of the hotel room door, came the newspaper. And what a luxury, right? I never actually get the newspaper anymore, but I only read 2 columns, the comics and horoscopes. And my horoscope that day, kid you not, for Scorpio said, you should begin writing your book today. And 2 days later, I began writing.
That is amazing. Oh, wow. You have to follow the horoscope, right? Yes. So,
I figured, the universe was really saying, you got to do this.
Yes. Yeah. No. I'm sure you've received such great feedback from this book. We're all talking about it, and so many people just really love it. What do you hope that people take away from it? I know you're saying you want to help people or just impart something for what people could take away from this.
I truly, truly hope it helps a lot of people. I hope it validates the human animal bond. For all of us on the call, we get that, but so many people don't understand it. I hope it validates the grieving process, and it helps those people that are trying to decide during that process. I hope it speaks to moms or parents who are trying to balance everything. Recently, someone had read the book, and she said, she has a 5-year-old healthy West Highland White Terrier named Oscar. And she said, after I've read it, I felt that I was a better dog parent. I felt that I was happier. Oh my goodness, I don't even remember the third thing. But even just those two, even just those 2 things filled me up. I have since, just through social media, like some people that I didn't know, strangers, have reached out, or people from like elementary school that I haven't talked to in 40 some years have reached out as to how it's touched them. And I've been so surprised that it's far more reaching than cancer or your dog. That it's really helped people to be happier. And that's what I hope it does for a lot more people.
That's wonderful. And I think it does. I really do. With that, so I would love to open up for some questions. Okay, and we will take questions about veterinary oncology. If you have questions, not too specific, I hope, but just we're Dr. Alsarraf is happy to speak to that. So do you have many cats in treatment, and do you have any memorable cat patients?
Yes, so I would say about 65% of my patients are dogs, and only about 35% are cats. And of course, I'll still get the, an occasional ferret or bunny or something like that. I have had some good stories from cats. One of them actually was back at the Animal Medical Center, and it was a woman who was dealing with pancreatic cancer. And I remember she could never come in during the standard hours for appointments. She could only come in at night. And so I would stay or try to book her an appointment or have her come in during my time on a double, which is, basically 5 p.m. to midnight, because it took her such a long time to get started during the daytime to feel good enough to go out. But it was very obvious that she wanted to do anything she could for her cat, as long as her cat had a good quality of life, because she felt that if she gave up on her cat, she would be giving up on herself. And she certainly didn't want to do that.
Wow. We have a question. Yes, well, a comment. Thank you. A wonderful presentation. Thank you. And then did you get an okay from the families you wrote about? Of course you did. Yes.
I did. Yes. And yeah, some of them, other than more than just the bloodhound, have come to some events and things like that. It's been very, very nice.
Back to the cat, I was telling you before that my cat was treated at AMC and they really kept him alive. He lived till almost 20. Dr. Liebman, and yeah, it was just, he got chemo and he did very well. And I think maybe, people who have experienced either themselves or just what we hear about cancer, do you find that they're afraid, or what are these side effects going to be? Is it going to be difficult? So there may be, not wanting to do it, right? So, but it's very different in pets.
Absolutely, right. And we all have these preconceived notions about what chemotherapy is, or we knew that our uncle had it, and oh my goodness, I don't want to put my dog or cat through it. I think there is no wrong answer. There truly is no wrong answer, as long as you lead with giving your pet the best quality of life. Notice I didn't say giving your pet the longest life, because sometimes we can give a long life, but it's not even a good quality. So as long as you lead with the intention to have the best quality of life, that's the most important thing. And we all do this. We read on the internet, and sometimes the internet can be a good thing, and sometimes it's a horrible thing because it steers us in the wrong direction, or you only get the zebras, right? It's important to go and listen, and maybe bring a friend or your spouse to have a second set of ears. It's important to come with a list of questions. A lot of times once, you're listening, you might realize, oh my goodness, some of these questions are already being answered. It's important to go home and think about this. And I'm not even just talking about cancer, it could be any condition. Because these are serious decisions. It's, especially in cancer, it's giving chemotherapy. It's not like starting amoxicillin, right? Just an antibiotic. It's a big deal. And it's important to have as few regrets as possible.
Well, I think even your advice about having the list of questions, writing things down as much as possible, because I know it's easy in that moment, especially if you're hearing the diagnosis, things go over your head, right? And yeah, so it is it's good to come in prepared, but just, I think that the veterinarians, I think that, right? So you're willing to kind of
one thing back 2 questions ago is legally, just so you guys know, I had to change the names of all of the pet parents and their animals. The only names that are true or real would be my husband's name, my son's name, and my own dog's name. But the animals that you're reading about, they have had their names changed.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. We have a question from Linda saying she struggled so much, or to made me comment to make a decision to put my dog through radiation recently. I'm so glad I did. Is there anything you say to families to help them come to terms with these choices? Great.
Again, not meaning to sound like a broken record, I do believe that knowledge is power. So if you understand the disease process, you understand what radiation can do, what the percentage or odds of it helping your dog or cat, what are the odds of it causing side effects, and how long those side effects can last, what you might need to do to help with that. And then the costs, right? Because it all goes into that. I think that those are all very important, and how that's going to work with the dynamic of your family. The other thing that sometimes helps is talking to someone who's gone through it. I find that often can be invaluable to know.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a question. My dog had cancer. He was treated with radiation, which may or may not have helped. It doesn't always. I really struggled with when to make the decision to put him down. What advice do you give to your patients about this? I found it very difficult.
So actually in chapter 9, it talks about that process. And again, there are no wrong answers as long as you lead with your dog's quality of life in the forefront. And none of us want to do it one day too soon. None of us want to make that decision one day too late. We always want to try to do it on the exact right day. In the book, I go through sort of like a bullet point list of different things to ask yourself. And there isn't a special algorithm where if it's positive for 4 of them, then you should consider euthanasia. But it's just things to think about, and things about your dog's quality of life that maybe you weren't assessing or you hadn't really realized. And I think it's also okay, and it's important to state here, that for some people, no matter what their beliefs, they don't believe in euthanasia. And that's okay too, right? As long as, say, you're working with your veterinarian or perhaps a mobile veterinarian for pain control or some sort of hospice type care. But I think in the end, for all of us, people or our beloved pets, as long as it comes from a place of love and you know, what is the word? Lack of fear and dignity, it's all we can hope for.
Yeah,
or it's the best we can hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you talk also in the book just about reassuring your clients that there's nothing that they did wrong, that their pet ended up at, which I thought was, because I think people always have a what did I do or what could I have done differently, right? So
correct. Yes.
It's also, very important. So thank you so much. We're getting a lot of thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, very heartfelt and touching, which I agree. So I would just say thank you, Dr. Alsarraf. Thank you so much for being with us, to share your extraordinary story and to inspire us, I think, to be more like our dogs, which I think was great. And thank you so much for just all the important work that you do and have done throughout your career. So, and I just want to say a quick thank you to Kimberly Young, our education coordinator, who does an amazing job all the time of organizing our events. And thank you so much to all of you for spending part of your evening with us. We wish you a safe and happy holiday season, and we will see you in the new year. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr.
everyone.
Alsarraf.